Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 23. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm bringing a conversation with Liz, a mom who works from home, who suffers from misophonia and tinnitus, and also cares for a child with autism. Now, even though she works from home, this interview was recorded a few months before this whole coronavirus pandemic hit. But we do actually talk about working from home and some tips and problems for misophonia sufferers. Hey, I hope you're doing all right stuck inside alone or with others, hoping you're finding ways to stay sane and connected. Let me know how you're doing. You can email me at hello@misophoniapodcast.com. Yeah, if you send me a mailing address, I'll be happy to send stickers out anywhere in the world. Connect with us. Instagram and Facebook, we're at Misophonia Podcast, or on Twitter at Misophonia Show. But for now, here we go. This is my conversation with Liz. I want to say, Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I guess what I usually like to start off with is just kind of like a little bit about you, like where are you located, what do you do for work, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I am in Kansas City, Missouri, and I work through a pharmaceutical company doing contract and budget negotiations between pharmaceutical companies and doctors that perform clinical trials.
So you do contract negotiations. Are you in an office environment? Like how's work?
Yeah, I work 100% from home, so it's kind of nice.
Excellent.
It really helps with a lot of the noise issues, actually, because that's where the majority of the time I think it triggers me the most. So being in a controlled work at home environment suits me well.
Did you kind of evolve to that after like years maybe of hell, or was it something that you just kind of lucked into?
Yeah, you definitely have to pay your dues and prove that you're capable enough, or at least that used to be the way. I don't know that it necessarily is anymore. I feel like more and more companies are moving towards this model just for, saves them the bottom line. And it's easier for their employees, kind of like a nice little perk for them that they don't have to, they actually save money to offer. So, but back when I first started, you had to pay your dues to show that you're the reliable person that can work from home.
That you're not going to just take naps all day. What kind of tools do you use? Do you use like Zoom or curious what if they've given you anything, set you up with anything that's particularly useful for working from home?
I mean, really, we rely heavily on Skype and other Microsoft clients. They haven't. It's a pretty large company, and so they stick to the basics. They're not going to try out new kind of hip
stuff. Yeah. So have you been at this company for a long time?
I actually haven't. It's only been about 2 years that I've worked here, and then previously I worked in a Kansas City located pharmaceutical, what they call a CRO, which is kind of like a third party that does the same job but for several sponsors. So that was an in-office job that I used to hold.
Gotcha. And how was that?
I mean, it had its ups and downs. Commute is never fun because I can't stand driving in traffic.
Oh,
so
God, yeah. It is the one time where yeah, it is. It's the one time where you're kind of like by yourself, unless you're carpooling. But yeah, right. It's just taxing on the mind.
It is, and I love to sing, and so of course, crank up your music,
perfect.
Roll your windows up, sing your heart out on everything.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. No. Commuting can suck. So it's great to work from home. We get that extra time, and obviously if you got kids, it's a lot easier to run errands and pick them up from emergency injuries and whatnot. So
well, and that's one definite benefit to working from home is that today, for example, is a snow day and my kids are at home. But if I have a meeting or doing something like this, I can just shut the door, and they're old enough they can just kind of take care of themselves, keep themselves busy, and I don't have to find daycare or somebody to watch them. So it's got a lot of perks for sure.
And okay, yeah. So you're in a good place now. But how? So let's go back to like early Liz days. When did this all start for you?
When I saw that question, it was really hard for me to nail it down
Yeah.
because I don't specifically remember when it started bothering me. But I can tell you that I do recall being a preteen or a teenager and hearing my friends just chomping their food with their mouths open. And it was not just disgusting from like a sound perspective, but just, did your mother not teach you manners? So I don't know if that all kind of blends in together, but that was when I really noticed that it was something that bothered me on a larger level than my peers, I suppose.
And it was mainly your friends, roughly your friends that were triggering you? Was it not? Mm-hmm.
Friends and some family members, of course, because that's the people that you eat with the most. One in particular that you can probably always pinpoint. That's one that all did it. But yeah, it was everywhere. Even if I was at a restaurant, if I could hear people doing it, it just always, even to this day, if I can tell when someone is eating an apple or chips or whatever the case may be. You can like hear that distinct sound, that distinct crunch or crisp or whatever.
Right. It just takes over your whatever sensors are going to your ear.
Yeah.
Preteen is very common from talking to folks. What was your reaction? Was it cringing, closing your ears, jumping on the table, screaming, or do you remember what that was, or kind of bottling it up?
Yeah, I've always called it like my itchy sweater. So it's kind of the thing that you can't take off, and it's just driving you nuts. But you're sitting there trying to be pleasant, and I don't know if some of this has to do with culture or because I'm a female, and so we kind of are,
be prim and proper or whatever.
Right,
all that crap.
We're kind of trained to just be polite and go with the flow. So it's always been the way that I've worded it to my therapist is that these are the things that are my itchy sweater, and that's definitely one of them. And so the reactions that I typically get is I just feel very uncomfortable. All of a sudden I get very grumpy, and I'm normally a pretty pleasant person. And so I do a thing where I read up on this where it's called fleeing or something to that effect. And so that's kind of like having that desire to flee the situation. That's totally me. Yes, I will just get up and walk away if it's to the point where I can't take it any longer. So
that's
those
probably
are
best
mine.
for everyone. Yeah,
it is. For sure.
And so obviously, again, super common, like the eating stuff. And did that start to affect school at all when you were preteen, high school, junior high?
So the only thing that I can think of that affected school-wise is there's those people that, and I don't know if this, because I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of like how this blends into other aspects of life, but things that would bother me sound-wise would be like people tapping their feet or their pencil over and over again. It's distracting to me. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing that I would say was probably the only thing that really affected my schooling would be just if I was taking a test and somebody was chewing gum or tapping their pencil repetitively, because repetitive noises really drive me bonkers. Mm-hmm. That would be a huge distraction.
And potentially just make you have to work harder on that test, I guess, to do well. Did it start to affect grades at all, or? And I don't know that I don't know if it affected my grades necessarily, but it definitely made it more challenging for me to focus. And so, potentially, because if you're not focused, then you're not getting your best grade. So, and how about socially? Like, friends, were you, obviously you're bottling things up a little bit, but were you confiding in anybody at the time or telling anybody?
No, I didn't even know this was a thing until probably 2 years ago when I met somebody that had the exact same reaction as I do.
Where did you meet that person?
Through work, actually, through my new job, or current job, I should say. And her and I became friends, and we just we found all these things that we had in common, and this happened to be one that we had very much in common. And she's the one that said, well, there's an actual name for that. And so then I started talking with my therapist about it, and that's how I kind of found out that's what I had. So.
Gotcha. And had your therapist heard about it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. That's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of awareness that's been spreading the past couple of years. So that's great to hear that you're meeting people at work, and then your therapist has even heard about it, because it's still not common in the medical and therapy community, unfortunately. And did your friend or your therapist, did they have like some coping mechanisms that they suggested?
So my therapist, we focus a lot on, because I also have OCPD, so obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And so we focus a lot on me trying to like be more flexible with things. And so with this, that's one of the things that he's trying to help me become a little bit more flexible, and also setting up boundaries with people. So if people are chewing with their mouth open, it's okay for me to be upset about that, because it's an upsetting thing. And so giving me permission to say, hey, do you mind chewing with your mouth closed, and not feel bad about actually using those words, which is kind of a funny thing, but just having a permission from a third party just makes it that much easier.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, I can totally see that. And what was it? You used a term, and I was gonna say, also thinking about, for example, in an eating situation, just in your head knowing that it's going to be over within 30 minutes. Kind of, you know, reminding yourself of that kind of helps, I guess. Just power through.
Yeah, like he helps me with things like, you know, is this something that is going to affect my mood tomorrow, 5 hours from now, you know, 5 minutes from now? And then that kind of helps get a grasp of the severity of the situation, and if it deserves your energy based on doing that kind of thought process of like, how long is this actually going to affect my life? Is it worth that energy?
Yeah. And has that kind of helped deal with situations a little bit better?
It does, as far as my reaction to it. I don't think it helps. I still get the same itchy sweater kind of feeling, but at least I'm a calmer person in the sense my reactions don't go to the extent that they used to. I do sometimes still plug my ear, the one ear closest to the person chewing.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten over doing that, but at least I feel like I'm a little bit more content, a little bit more pleasant to be around during those situations.
And do you get what kind of reactions do you get from people who are closest to that ear? Is it, you know, do they look at you like, what the? Or is it,
I mean, depending, of course, if somebody knows that I have it or not. Like my family is really 100% used to it. My husband, my kids, they know, and they're pretty sympathetic toward it, especially since the more research you do, you find like that's just not anything you can really help. Yeah. If you're being purposefully mean or, you know, indignant toward the other person. It's just something that is a part of who you are. So they're very understanding. But yeah, if you have a stranger that has no idea that you have this and you see that, you know, they see me put my finger in my ear, they're like, what is...
Yeah, like why am I eating next to this freak, and how do we get out of here?
Well, they think there's like a loud noise that they're just not privy to.
Yeah, right. Did they think, am I deaf? What's going on? I don't. Oh, that okay. Cool. Okay. Well, that's interesting. And does your immediate family trigger you, like your kids, your husband, or well, I guess they do in general, but no other. I mean, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. If anybody's eating chips or cereal's another one I cannot handle.
God. Yeah.
Between the crunching and the slurping of the milk, it's just like game over. And apples. Those are like my three big ones that just bother me. And those happen to be like my family's like three favorite things to eat. So yeah, I mean, of course, I would say I'm triggered on a daily basis, but I get up and walk away, and they know that it's not any offense toward them, or I sit a little further away from whomever is eating, or whatever the case may be.
So you try to sit there, but no, that's seems like it seems like there's a mutual understanding there. And honestly, if your family wasn't eating apples, they'd probably getting sick, and then you get got to deal with all the sniffles and the
Yeah,
coughing and all
exactly.
that stuff. So it's pick your poison. Okay, cool. And so I guess and have your triggers? So it's those three. Were they always those three? Have they kind of expanded? I've heard, triggers kind of like expanding over time to more
Yeah.
people, more kinds of things.
I would say that those are the three that are probably like the top most, but definitely it's gotten worse as I've gotten older, to the point where like people's talking voices bother me. So if I feel like they need to take a drink of water, I get really frustrated.
Yes.
If there's just like a sense of dryness in their voice, let's say, or if they have a little bit too much vocal fray, or there's certain things about people's voices that sometimes will drive me over the wall.
I think a lot of us listening know what you're talking about. Yes. There's that. Oh my God. There's like this one character. You're like, oh, just clear it. Just clear it.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah.
And I find myself like making me action, like I'll clear my throat, hoping that maybe they'll subconsciously think.
Suggestive. Yeah. Because I've heard of mimicking as also a coping mechanism. So if like somebody's eating that apple, you just start eating an apple even louder, and somehow that effect helps some people.
Yeah.
But interesting that using a kind of like a Jedi mind trick kind of thing where you try to suggest that they clear their throat. That's an interesting idea too. Oh, I should try that.
There is a social construct that exists where if you want other people to like you, you tend to mimic what they're doing. And so that is kind of it is like a psychological trick that sometimes does, just because it's that whole mob mentality of everybody needs to be similar. And so I don't know if it is scientifically proven to work, but I've noticed for me, it sometimes does. It's kind of that thing, like if somebody's got eye goop in the corner of their eye and you just start rubbing your eye, they just instinctively go up and kind of rub their eye. It's that same kind of a thought process, I guess.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I should try that. I'm just afraid that if they don't do it, I'll get carried away and get really loud with my clearing. But that's probably just on me. And then speaking of that, do visual triggers kind of trigger you? I've heard more about that recently as well.
Like, give me an example, because I don't know that is.
Yeah. So, let's say you can't hear somebody tapping that pencil or whatever, but you can kind of see it, or you can see somebody eating one of your triggers like far away, but it's not that loud to you. Does that kind of like the anticipation of hearing that sound bother you?
I don't think so. I think for me, it is truly the sound or the movement, because I will say that like somebody shaking their leg repetitively is just as bad as somebody tapping their pencil repetitively.
Yeah, so that's the guy. It's part of misokinesia. It's kind of that fear of movement, not fear, but the sensitivity to movement, I guess. So that is kind of part of it. Okay, so you have the suggesting people clear the throat. You have a great contract with your people, your loved ones, where you can kind of like plug your ears at will or leave. Do you have any other kind of coping mechanisms like music or sounds that you listen to, or stress balls you destroy?
I do. So to add insult to injury, I also have really bad tinnitus, and so music's always been a very huge part of my life. I can't fall asleep without noise, because otherwise all I can focus on is the tinnitus, which is in itself a repetitive noise, and so that bothers me. So music and honestly just TV. I can never just sit in an absolute void of sound, because that would be just as bad for me. Whereas with other people with miso, it might actually be like a sense of comfort. For me, it actually is the opposite, because my tinnitus bothers me just as much as everything that I hear in the world. So it's a balance for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And so you need some sound to kind of mask that tinnitus tone or whatever it is. And did you have tinnitus since around the same time, or was it all something that crept? Did it come up later?
That came up later. I would say starting in my late 20s, and it has gone as tinnitus does, get progressively worse as you get older. I really started to notice it in my mid 30s, is when it kind of hit its highest point to date. Into where I went to an audiologist, and they said there's really nothing much that we can do for you, because if you have a hearing aid, it's going to pick up all of the sounds that you're trying to drown out.
So they knew about your misophonia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did they know about the misophonia before, or did you tell them that you had it?
I knew about, I told them that I had it, because this was just in like the last year. I went to an audiologist for how bad it's something. And basically it's kind of that situation of you're going to make one thing worse in the hope of making something else better. So at least with the tinnitus, that like it stays at a solid sound, so I can find something that can drown it out. Whereas with the miso, it's like if there's somebody chewing, that's just like it's a start and a stop. I don't know how else to describe it. And so there's no like consistency to it. So there's no way for me to regulate it necessarily.
Interesting. So your tinnitus does that sound is kind of a trigger for your miso too?
I feel like it is, just because the ear is already taking in so much information with just the tinnitus that when you introduce something else, it just feels like it's chaos and it's just too much. So
I guess, how old are your kids, by the way? I'm just curious.
Yeah, my daughter is 11 and my son is, he just turned 8. So.
Okay. And they're not showing any signs of miso. Not that it's hereditary or anything. I'm just curious if I go to that convention. There's always kids who just have it that are there, but then there's also sometimes discussion amongst the adults about how do you talk about it? Do you talk about it with your kids? And because we don't know if it's purely genetic, or is it something that comes up in the environment? Do you want to shine a spotlight on it, or do you want to kind of just not shine too much of a spotlight on it in hopes that they won't kind of pick it up? I'm just curious, have you kind of thought about this as you've dealt with this and raised your kids?
So I have, and the main reason is because my son has autism, and he also has like a sensory processing disorder, which can sort of be similar in a sense, because he's got those heightened senses, and every bit of information he takes in, it can be, if his tags are too itchy, then that's going to be the thing that triggers him and sets him off. Or if he hears a sudden burst of sound, then that triggers him. So to a certain extent, I'm like, well, gosh, is this like a precursor to a sensory processing disorder? Is this something that's like one step below it? Or is it related in some way? I mean, I've always kind of been curious about that, just in the sense that they kind of seem like they have some commonalities, and I've never done the research into it. I don't know if anybody has, but it's just something that's kind of not at the back of my brain.
Yeah, I've just heard that they can overlap, but they also don't have to. It's like there isn't. I don't think there is a one-to-one correlation by any means. But yeah, that's interesting. And do you guys go to? I know. So in the last few years, there's been so many like sensory processing. I don't say themed events, but like you can go to like theaters and grocery stores even, where it's like sensory friendly. And I've been thinking of like collating, like getting a list of these together, but because you can search for them and find them in various places. I'm curious, what are your experiences with those, and do you take your kids there?
Yeah, we've tried a couple of them, and they definitely help sometimes, and sometimes they make it worse. And
for him or for you, or both?
For him. For me, no. I mean, I put up with whatever, just because as a mom, that's
Yeah.
But for him, it's a matter of like, you got to kind of weigh your options, because if it's because the fact that most kids that have sensory are a little less apt to be calm 100% of the time, right? Not that any kid is ever calm 100% of the time, but there's going to be more movement and more noises and more action that come from a child that has sensory issues a lot of the times, because they have, other mingling disorders that go along with that. Mm-hmm. So it just depends, because he gets really frustrated when kids yell, because that bothers him. So if you have a child that's got a sensory processing disorder, but that also like has a tendency to call out, and have a tick that where he yells or she yells or anything like that, then that's going to bother him. So sometimes it works out great and sometimes not so much, just because then you're kind of increasing the opportunity for him to have those triggers. Just
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So it depends. I think that with people with miso, though, I don't know. Have they had sensory events that are related toward people that have something such as us, or is that just more
specifically misophonia? No, I have not. It's just whenever I read about these, and it's just one is fascinating is when you describe that, it sounds like there's got to be some overlap with miso, but I don't think that's conclusive at all. But anyways, when I read these descriptions, it just seems like, oh, okay, well, grocery night, we're gonna turn the lights down. It doesn't affect us, but they're not going to there's a grocery store nearby they're not going to collect the carts, so you don't get that big whatever
right.
and all that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know what else. I think they turned down the beeping of all the cash registers and things like that. So I feel like, I mean, I'd go shopping there for sure. It's not specifically for miso. They may not have even heard of it. So, but I feel like I feel like the society is slowly accommodating these other like autism, and I feel like we should kind of. I don't think that there's nothing specific for miso yet, but we should just voice our appreciation whenever we go to these things, and maybe say, thank you for helping my son, but also, did you know that I have this, and that might kind of spark their creative juices too, or we might come up with some suggestions. But I feel like it might not happen like right away, but I think if society's kind of evolving to kind of make things a little bit easier for all of us. So it's just an interesting trend, the sensory friendly nights or events.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's all about advocating for yourself, right? I mean, if you have some sort of a condition that causes you discomfort, the only way if somebody's going to accommodate is if you speak up and say something. Otherwise, the lack of knowing, ignorance about this particular disorder is going to mean that nobody's going to make accommodations because they just don't know it exists, which, I mean, really, it's not something widely known. It's not a common thing for people to discuss. So,
yeah. And so how did you bring it up with your now husband? Was it something you talked about before you got married, or was it like you sprung it on him after everything was signed and everything?
No, I'm pretty much an open book, so he knew. He knew things bothered me, and especially when it came to like eating, he could see. I think he was just perceptive to it, and could see that I was bothered by, what at the time I just kind of correlated with manners too. Now it kind of more has a name to it, but he was just really just understanding about it. He's a pretty easygoing guy. He never really has any bad things to say about it. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, and did it affect other friendships? And I guess we talked about kind of earlier on. I'm wondering, college 20s, as you're kind of like becoming independent into the world. Did it kind of affect, I don't know, early jobs or opportunities or relationships and things like that in those kind of like formative independent years?
I don't think so, but I also think subconsciously I just tend to draw towards people that have a pleasant voice, and I back to that, I really just have always honed in on the way that people speak. And so I feel like maybe I've just not put myself in a position of ever having to be triggered by other people consistently. So it could have been all subconscious, or maybe I just am lucky. I'm not sure which, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting self-conscious about my voice. So
nope, fine.
Kidding. Cool. And so, other than your coworker, have you met other misophones anywhere, like online or kind of in person in Missouri?
Well, the funny thing is after I started talking about it, I found out one of my cousins has the same thing, and that was kind of interesting. We just have never talked about it because it wasn't something that, again, I knew about, but. Yeah. But yeah, we've talked about it a couple of times, and then, like I said, my one friend that I met that has it through work, her and I joke about whenever you're on conference calls, you can tell that people are like they're putting themselves on mute to eat their food, and then they unmute, haven't quite finished, and we'll crack jokes about that. I will say I'm very happy I'm not in an office environment so that I don't get frustrated with how loudly people might talk on the phone or if they're eating desks. Those kinds of things I don't miss, or the people that aggressively type on their computers.
Well, it's because they're so important that they have to type so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally what we think about. Yeah. It's funny what we think about when we're hearing that stuff. Interesting. Okay. And there's one more thing I was gonna ask. Yeah. Okay. Your cousin. No, I don't remember. Obviously.
That's okay.
I guess. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So kind of about your cousin. So I don't know when this is going to. I've got such a backlog. This will probably be a few months before this gets edited and goes live and whatnot. But I do want to talk about just kind of holidays and stuff. We're in between the big holidays. I'm curious. It sounds like your family is super accommodating, but have you had? Do you think about that, like your escape routes and whatnot, and when you're gathering with larger family? I don't know. Any other tips that you have?
Yeah, I don't know any tips or anything because really I'm probably not the right person. I'm just super accommodating and I'll just kind of, just go with the flow. I don't tend to get, I feel like I'm triggered more in stressful situations than I am in happy situations. And so,
very common.
if we're celebrating a holiday, I don't tend to be as persnickety about the noise. And plus, there's a lot of people around, so the noise level in general is a lot louder. So it's going to drown out some of those things that would trigger me. So I really don't tend to have issues on the holidays. Mine are more when I'm, one-on-one eating with someone, or if I go, to like I said, the office setting would definitely be one that triggers me, or if I'm at a restaurant and there's too many clickety-clackities or, just whatever the case is. That's more a more lower scale.
Very cool. Those are all great tips. Going with the flow is something I think we all need to kind of remember more. I think we all get caught up with the sounds in our heads that we kind of forget about that. So that's great that you're that people are accommodating around you generally, and you're able to kind of like take a deep breath. That's very cool. And are you still seeing that audiologist, by the way, or are you planning to see them more, or are you gonna, or is that just kind of a test for your tinnitus and whatnot?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to have to go back again. I'm 39 now, and I already been to an audiologist, so I assume that the amount of times I'll have to go back over my course of my lifetime versus a normal person, I'm sure it's going to be more frequent. But I assume just if I get a new pitch, because I have different pitches of tinnitus, and I anytime I get a new pitch. Yeah, it's like you get them both at the same time. So like for a while it was just one consistent pitch, and now I kind of have two that go simultaneously at the same time. One's kind of a little higher than the other.
Gotcha.
And then from what I understand, it's your brain's way of trying to make up for the lack of hearing that specific pitch that you've lost, and so that's why you get pitches. So I just assume whenever I get a new pitch, that's probably when I should go in and get tested again, because that means my hearing's changed.
Gotcha. Interesting. This has been great, Liz. I'm glad we could hear your story. It sounds like you are, you've had a lot of the similar experiences that a lot of folks have had, but fortunately you've been kind of in, you're surrounded by people who obviously care a little bit more than unfortunately some other folks, and that's great. That's great to hear. I hope that's inspiring for other folks out there who are suffering. Do you have any? There's a lot of people who've been bottling this up for a while. Do you have any kind of like platitudes or little other kind of tips that you want to share with folks who are listening?
Oh gosh. The only thing I can say, so I did hear this is just a fun one for those that the repetitive noises drive you nuts. Mm-hmm. So I get earworms, and earworms drive me crazy, right? So if I hear a song that just is playing on a loop in my head, I found this tip, and I cannot even remember where I heard it, that if you if you sing a small enough kind of advertisement or jingle that's small enough that it can't repeat, but memorable enough that it's stuck in your head, it'll get rid of your earworms. So my family will hear me every now and again just go, "Bye, Menon," because that's how I get rid of earworms, is I just sing that out loud and then it goes away. So there you go. If you have a little jingle that you are very familiar with and you're trying to get rid of an earworm, sing it out.
That is an amazing tip, and I appreciate that, because in particular because it's a Seinfeld reference as well for those who follow George Costanza. I forget which episode, season 7, I think. But anyways, that's great. Well, yeah, thanks again, Liz, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you for listening to another episode. As always, let me know what you think. Hello at misophoniapodcast.com. If you like what you're hearing, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts. It really helps people find the podcast by having it higher up in the rankings. I'm excited to start a new batch of interviews in a few weeks, which will be slowly going out over the summer. Check out the website, misophoniapodcast.com, for a link to be a guest. A lot of these slots have been booked, but stuff might be opening up as people may be canceled due to scheduling issues because of the pandemic or otherwise. Theme music this week is by Moby, and until next week, wishing you good health, peace, and quiet.